Homage to Venerable Khenpo. I would like to ask a question. Khenpo just mentioned observing the mind with the mind. I want to ask, how do we observe the mind? How do we look inward?
There are many methods for observing the mind with the mind. But generally speaking, when we practice Chan meditation, there are two main methods. One is the formless method of observation. That is to say, the mind does not cling or attach itself to anything at all. When your mind becomes distracted outwardly, use your own mind to gently maintain its focus and use the mind to bring it back. In Buddhism, this is called right mindfulness and right awareness, using right mindfulness and right awareness to guard your own mind. There is another method of observing the mind, which is to say, during the process of meditation, if your mind is especially prone to constantly wandering outward, or if you become attached to external things, we should visualize the Buddha or Bodhisattva image. I often recommend visualizing the image of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva or Shakyamuni Buddha. A photograph is fine, a bronze statue is fine, just place it here. Look at it with your eyes, then focus your mind and then close your eyes. In this way, originally you were using the mind to observe the mind, but now you use the mind to focus on an external object. Through this method, on one hand, you receive the blessings of the Buddha, and on the other, you develop your own ability to observe the mind. When these specific conditions come together and are present at the same time, eventually the mind can begin to settle down, and you can gradually start to recognize your own mind for what it truly is. Actually, the mind itself has a kind of unique, subjective ability or quality. All actions, including my speaking right now and all the various actions of my body, are now directed by the mind, which has become the primary commander-in-chief of our actions and decisions. Whatever the mind directs, the body and speech follow. So managing the mind is extremely important. If we don't manage our mind well, then our bodies will commit all sorts of misdeeds, and our speech will say anything without restraint. But if you can use the mind to thoughtfully and carefully observe the mind, then everything will be regulated and there will naturally be some limits. In this way, our behavior will become regulated quite naturally.
Master, hello. I would like to tell you a story, and there are a few questions within it. I am actually a student from another school. I have a very good friend who did something that he truly believes is right. But I feel, from the bottom of my heart, that I need to help him spiritually. I also think that what he did is right, so I wonder deep down, should I insist on helping him? Or should I simply allow things to take their course naturally and freely, perhaps allowing him to discover for himself in life? One day, he also met a spiritual master. What the master told him was actually the same as what I told him. But he believed the master's words and did not trust what I said. So how should I think about this situation?
What you said to me earlier should be correct. Actually, in this complex world, the same words spoken by two different people can have completely different effects and impacts on others. For example, a sentence spoken by a scientist and a sentence spoken by me, people all think that what the scientist says is correct. What I say may not always be right or correct, because I am just an ordinary monk, nothing more. Many people, when they hear me speak, might think to themselves, what could he possibly know? That's impossible. But if I use the language of scientists in front of scientists, I often use certain phrases or expressions that the scientists often use. I immediately bring up, if they don't accept it, this is from Einstein, this is from Newton, and then they stop talking. In front of Buddhists, I first use the words of Nagarjuna Bodhisattva or Shakyamuni Buddha. If the Buddhist doesn't accept it, I then say, actually, you shouldn't reject it. What I just said was actually from Nagarjuna Bodhisattva, and then they stop talking. So this is essentially the habit and tendency of ordinary people. According to Buddhism, due to people's wisdom, merit, and other aspects being different, even when they say the same words, their effect in the world can be completely different and varied. At a certain point, they will also come to truly understand what you have done for them and the efforts you have made. You really shouldn't be upset.
All right, thank you.
I'm very glad to see you at our university. I'm a graduate student majoring in Chinese philosophy, and I have 3 questions I'd like to ask you. The first is Buddha nature and human nature. What are their similarities and differences? The second is about the Buddhist teaching that all sentient beings have the wisdom of the Tathagata. How does this compare to the Confucian idea everyone can become a sage like Yao or Shun? The third question concerns Eastern Jin Buddhist scholar Zhu Daosheng, who said even the Ichantika can become a Buddha. What value does this Buddhist view of equality among all sentient beings have for society? Thanks for your guidance.
I've already forgotten all three of your questions, honestly. Just kidding, let me think about them for a moment. The first question is about human nature and Buddha nature, right? I think that this can be discussed from both the perspective of appearances and the perspective of ultimate reality. If we look at it deeply from the perspective of ultimate reality and truth, there shouldn't be any real or fundamental difference between Buddha nature and human nature at all. But when we understand it on the level of conventional appearances and relative truth, Buddha nature is not just something simple as we imagine. When we talk about Buddha nature, according to important and profound Buddhist texts of the third turning of the Dharma wheel, like the Tathagatagarbha Sutra and the treatise on Buddha nature, and so on, these texts discuss that what they talk about is that the so-called essence of human nature is not different from Buddha nature. They are one and the same. So I think on the level of appearances, there should indeed be a clear difference between the two. But on the level of ultimate reality, there is actually no real difference. Now, for the second question, I think that Confucianism and Buddhism teaches that all sentient beings possess the virtues and qualities of the Tathagata, while Confucianism says that people possess the heart of Yao and Shun. In fact, in a certain sense, as I mentioned in class earlier this morning to everyone, Confucian thought and philosophy does have its own unique and significant value in society. On the aspect of promoting goodness and virtue, it does a pretty good job and performs well. However, the profound Buddhist idea that all sentient beings possess the virtues and qualities of the Tathagata compared to Confucian thought. I have gone through and studied many classical Confucian texts carefully and thoroughly over the years. In Confucianism, let alone the idea that all sentient beings has the Tathagatagarbha. In some parts of Confucianism, it even allows for harming other beings, including animals, under certain circumstances. For example, killing fish for the sake of one's parents, and so on. There are such cases that have been documented. So, as a result, it does not fully acknowledge or recognize that every sentient being possesses the kind of Tathagata virtues that Buddhism recognizes. What it does acknowledge is quite simply a genuinely kind-hearted nature. In fact, it maintains that human beings possess a fundamentally kind heart, although this does not extend to include all sentient beings. Does it possess a kind heart toward all beings? No, it doesn't. Therefore, the scope of Confucian culture should be considered rather narrow. I've always held this view. Is Confucianism good? It should be considered very good. But the knowledge of Confucianism is only knowledge pertaining to humans. Moreover, it doesn't address the afterlife of humans at all. What happens after a person dies? At most, after 3 years, it no longer concerns itself with the matter. Before those 3 years, some funeral rites are performed, and there is a sense of mourning for the deceased. But after that, it is no longer addressed or discussed. As for a person's previous life, the text really does not say much about it, what it was truly like. Neither Confucius nor Mencius talked about this. In this regard, Taoism, as a philosophy, also does not really go into much detail about this particular aspect. Relatively speaking, when it comes to the afterlife, heaven, and happiness in the next life, I think Christianity addresses these important topics to some extent and degree, but compared to Hinduism and Buddhism teachings and philosophy, this is not taught in detail or depth. So, if you want to understand past and future lives or the relationship between oneself and others when it comes to the value of all sentient beings' lives and the universe itself, I think only Buddhism addresses this. Of course, what Buddhism teaches, the principle that every sentient being possesses the qualities of a Tathagata, is thoroughly and comprehensively described in great detail in the Buddha Shakyamuni's third turning of the Dharma wheel. As for the third question, I believe Buddhism's view of equality truly has a significant and profound impact on our real-world society and modern life. Nowadays, people all advocate strongly for a harmonious society and peaceful coexistence. in your rich and profound Hanshan culture as well, there are various important concepts such as the sage of harmony and the immortal of harmony. Taoism has its own interpretations and Buddhism has its own as well. But I genuinely think that, in my opinion, to truly achieve lasting and meaningful world peace, as well as peace between nations and between individuals, including the concept of equality between animals and humans and all beings, I believe this can be realized and achieved within Buddhism teachings and practice. How is it realized? It is not just a slogan. Many of today's concepts of world peace are actually just slogans on the surface level. I think that in the teachings of Buddhism, all sentient beings are considered to be equal. Why are sentient beings, and I regard it as equal? First of all, we are all fundamentally equal when it comes to our shared capacity for feeling and experiencing emotions. Why are people actually equal to each other? It's not that people are considered equal simply because we all have two hands, or just because we all have a head, or because we all wear clothes in our daily lives. That's not the real reason. So, why are people truly equal to each other? It's because he seeks happiness and I seek happiness too. When it comes to seeking true happiness and avoiding suffering and pain, there is truly no real or fundamental difference between people at all. Everyone needs this kind of value in life. Most importantly, this concept also applies between humans and animals. In Buddhism, there is the practice of exchanging self and others and the equality of self and others. There is also the important practice of considering oneself less and others more. These are indeed the three main methods for cultivating bodhicitta. For any ethnic group in the world, for any sentient being, for any person, these three main practices should truly embody the most important value. If in reality, not everyone in the world nowadays simply treats world peace merely as a hollow and empty slogan anymore, but rather, if every person genuinely and truly holds the concept of true equality among all beings, then achieving world peace would truly not be difficult at all. Why can't countries be equal to each other? It's precisely because of self-centeredness. With this as the reason, can there be world peace? It's very difficult. All wars, all conflicts, inevitably arise because of self-centeredness. So if the ideals of Mahayana Buddhism are truly and sincerely upheld with the bodhicitta of equality between self and others, then all these slogans in the world would become reality.
Venerable Master, hello. I am a teacher at the School of Foreign Languages at Suzhou University of Science and Technology. I am also very interested in Buddhist studies. Having just listened to your teaching, I have also gained a lot of correct and valuable understanding about Buddhism and its core principles. However, I still have some questions that remain in my mind. For example, according to the perspectives of the Madhyamaka school and the prajna theory of emptiness in Buddhism, in order to transcend both birth and death, we must truly and deeply understand the illusory nature of the self, the so-called no-self in people, and even the idea of no-self in all phenomena. In this way, when we practice, we should not have any attachments at all. But this brings up an important problem. After we die, we inevitably fall into what is known as the cycle of the 6 realms of rebirth. So, who precisely is it that is actually reincarnating? In other words, is there truly a soul? Or, as Taoism says, through careful cultivation, one can ultimately have the primordial spirit leave the body, and both body and spirit become wondrous, thus attaining immortality. In that case, there is a spiritual consciousness. But since Buddhism denies this, even though it speaks of emptiness and illusory existence, it basically still denies the existence of such a thing. So the first question is, who is the subject that undergoes reincarnation? Next, related to this important topic and discussion, according to Buddhist theory and deep philosophical understanding, not only is the true nature of all sentient beings empty and without inherent existence, but even becoming a Buddha itself is empty. In other words, is this Buddha an objectively real existence? Isn't our goal in cultivation and spiritual practice to become an arhat, a Buddha, or a bodhisattva? But if none of these actually exist, doesn't that mean we lose the goal or purpose of cultivation?
This is a very practical and important question from the teacher here today. In fact, many people nowadays have doubts about some of the fundamental principles of Buddhism right at this very point. The emptiness advocated by Buddhism, as well as the existence of reincarnation, are theories on different levels of understanding and truth. Does Buddhism recognize and acknowledge the existence of those who undergo reincarnation? Yes, it does. So, does the self that transmigrates through reincarnation exist? Yes, it exists. Does Buddhism recognize and acknowledge the doctrine of no self in people and in phenomena, that the self does not exist? It also acknowledges this. So, doesn't this mean that I both exist and do not exist? Isn't this a contradiction? Your two questions, actually, from the Buddhist perspective, are not only not contradictory, but we must properly and fully acknowledge them in this way. If we do not acknowledge them as such, it doesn't hold up theoretically. And in practice, it is also inescapable. Why do I say this, you may ask? Does Buddhism say that the 6 realms of reincarnation actually exist? Indeed, before you attain realization, for those who have not realized, the 6 realms of reincarnation all exist. This includes everyone present here today, both the teachers and the students. They all exist within these realms. But when we take a moment to recognize and reflect on their true origin, understanding where these realms and all beings truly come from, everyone here present today does not exist in ultimate reality. And even the 6 realms of reincarnation do not exist at all, ultimately. Is this a contradiction or paradox? Not at all in any way. It's just like a certain scientific theory in the world today. I often tell everyone from the perspective and understanding of quantum mechanics, the teacup I'm holding in my hand right now, does its phenomenon exist? In fact, it certainly does. But is this phenomenon actually made up of molecules, or is it composed of electrons? To our unaided, naked eyes, it definitely is not something we can directly see. But after physicists observe it, is there ultimately a truly existent teacup? No, there isn't. It is a form of energy, and apart from this fundamental energy, nothing else can be found through scientific analysis. This is what a scientist would say based on empirical observation. When he looks at a bottle, he can acknowledge that the bottle exists as a functional object, and he can also acknowledge that it is a form of energy when examined at the quantum level. But can energy hold tea? Energy cannot hold tea, because energy is not an independent container. So after this realization and analysis, you think samsara truly exists on the conventional level, while I see it as empty in nature from the ultimate perspective of reality. Then how could my emptiness possibly be reborn into samsara? There is a certain difference in these concepts. So when Shakyamuni Buddha gave the first turning of the Dharma wheel, he said that all phenomena and things truly exist. So was what he said correct? Yes, it was correct. Everyone present has a sense of self, and there is also the 6 realms of samsara. The Buddha described this extraordinary phenomenon, which is called the first turning of the Dharma wheel. During the second turning of the Dharma wheel, he taught that the true nature of all existing things is emptiness. At that time, the Heart Sutra and the great Prajnaparamita Sutra taught that all phenomena are ultimately empty. On that level, including Buddhahood, the 6 realms of samsara, and all phenomena, everything is emptiness. This emptiness is not merely a theory. It can be clearly established and demonstrated through careful philosophical reasoning as well. I am not sure if you have studied this or not. The greatest and most renowned scholar in Buddhism is referred to as Nagarjuna Bodhisattva. In his fundamental wisdom of the middle way, Nagarjuna Bodhisattva uses reasoning throughout to make these determinations. All things, without exception, even the tiniest, most minuscule, truly existing phenomenon, do not exist. On that level, nothing at all exists. So then, would it be the case that if nothing exists, how could one fall into the 6 realms of samsara? Well, we say that in front of the deluded, in the face of appearances, it's similar to what I just mentioned about quantum mechanics. From the perspective of phenomena, these things do exist. From the perspective of essence, this bottle should be empty. It is made up of countless particles, or you could say a form of dynamic energy without solid substance. Apart from this, there is no truly existent or independently teacup that can be found. In fact, this theory still holds up. Other than energy, nothing else exists as a phenomenon. This point is also valid. But what else is valid? It is valid that within phenomena, right before us, it can completely function as a phenomenon. This is also valid. In the same way, the Buddha taught us about two levels. In Buddhism, these are called the ultimate truth and the conventional truth. Within the ultimate truth, all phenomena are empty in nature. Within the conventional truth, all appearances exist. Everyone present here now exists within the conventional truth. When we carefully study the Prajna teachings or deeply engage in meditation, when one truly realizes the ultimate truth, all phenomena completely vanish like smoke. In that enlightened state, you can handle everything with complete ease and freedom. Therefore, this kind of profound state, by studying and deeply practicing Buddhist Madhyamaka philosophy and Vajrayana teachings, we can go even further toward realization. These two represent two kinds of phenomena and two levels of understanding in perfect harmony.
Hello, I have a few questions. The first question is, when practicing the 5 perfections of pure vision, I want to ask about the perfection of time, since the others seem simple, but this perfection of time, I'm not quite sure how to think about it specifically.
The perfection of time varies depending on the Dharma being taught. For example, when you are currently practicing Chan meditation and someone is teaching you the specific methods of Chan step by step, at that very precise time, it should be considered the perfect moment for transmitting the Dharma to you, just like when Shakyamuni Buddha turned the Dharma wheel 3 times in progressive stages to sentient beings. The time of the 3 turnings of the Dharma wheel is called the perfection of time. That special moment at the time is established as the perfection of time.
Okay, thank you. I have a second question. I've read books by Khenpo Sodargye. I'm not sure if I just didn't remember it or what. The book explains that the Tathagatagarbha refers to the true emptiness or blankness that between 2 deluded thoughts. He said that this can be roughly considered as Tathagatagarbha. Is that correct? I've seen some explanations saying that this is not the ultimate meaning.
This question concerns Khenpo Tsultrim Lodro, so ask him directly.
Would you please help me to ask him this question for me?
If you want me to ask, when would I have the chance to give you an answer? I haven't met him yet.
I'd like to hear your insights.
My thoughts are that perhaps, what he actually meant was the distinction between attachment and non-attachment. Because generally speaking, the nature of Tathagatagarbha can be understood on 2 levels. On one level, it refers to the Dharma nature of all phenomena, an inconceivable state. At that point, all deluded thoughts, attachments, and discriminations have already been eliminated. At that time, it possesses a nature or level that does not incline toward any form of attachment. This level, in fact, is not different from the true Dharma nature of the Tathagata. It should be understood from a relatively simple perspective like this. If someone denies this, as you said, actually, in Tibetan Buddhism, some individuals consider it to be a kind of mere emptiness. Mere emptiness is one way of interpreting or understanding Tathagatagarbha. Others, however, believe that this interpretation is not Tathagatagarbha. If mere emptiness were Tathagatagarbha, then the mere emptiness of a bottle, simply its absence, would also become Tathagatagarbha. If that's the case, then, in fact, what the Khenpo is actually referring to, in essence, is that the so-called Tathagatagarbha is the state that is completely free from all forms of attachment. In fact, this intermediate state is truly inseparable from the very nature of all phenomena. This part can also be initially understood as Tathagatagarbha. Is that correct? Let me ask and then continue.
Thank you. And one last question. I've read the Tibetan book of Living and Dying, which is a very famous book. It says that during the Bardo stage, after 49 days, one is reborn. It says that during those 49 days, a different Buddha image appears each day. Is this the same for everyone? Does it depend on practice level or belief? Will there be different manifestations according to the karma one has created? Or is it the same for everyone? It's just that some people recognize them and some don't. That's all. Thank you.
Honestly, I've considered and reflected on this question before as well. Actually, it's not necessarily the case for everyone. That all the Tathagata images of the peaceful and wrathful mandalas appear during the 49 or 7 days. For some people, as explained in the teachings on the Bardo, although these manifestations do appear, they pass by like a shooting star, so there's no way to recognize them, especially for those who have no understanding of this Dharma at all. Even if the manifestations appear, what appears before you is a different form. Perhaps when your karmic obscurations are somewhat heavier, you may see images of your past acts of killing, or other related visions may arise before you. But if your karmic obscurations are lighter, and you have already previously planted virtuous roots in relation to the Bardo teachings, if you have good habitual tendencies and have formed positive connections, then the 100 peaceful and wrathful deities that originally appear, when they appear continuously, you recognize them. When you recognize them, you abide in your own true nature, and through this you attain liberation. Therefore, this only applies to certain sentient beings with the right connections. Not everyone is able to witness such appearances. Moreover, when these appearances manifest, for example, some time ago, I saw the 16 Arhats. The images depicted in Tibetan Buddhism are a kind of Thangka painting from Tibetan Buddhism. Meanwhile, in Chinese Han Buddhism, there are many different images that are unique and specific to Chinese Han Buddhism. So I think that for people from various different cultures, the manifestations of certain deities or spiritual beings at the time of death may also appear in different forms. It's very likely that you need to practice while you're alive. For example, the 16 Arhats in the Han region, or the 3 Western saints. When Amitabha comes to receive you, his appearance and attire may differ from those in Tibetan Buddhism. The practices you do while alive may not necessarily be the same either. This is true for different people, and it's the same in our daily lives. When I was in Tibetan region, if I wore Tibetan clothes every day, then even in my dreams, I might feel like I'm still wearing Tibetan clothes. If I wear Han clothing in the Han region, maybe in my dreams too. Manifestations in the Bardo and in dreams are often closely related. Many are simply the surfacing of a person's habitual tendencies at that time. If you recognize this, there is essentially no difference in liberation at that moment.
Hello, Master. I have 2 questions that I would like to ask you today. The first one is about the process of meditation. Some practitioners during meditation may experience for a long time the sound of Amitabha continuously echoing in their minds. Some may even experience tinnitus, a kind of auditory illusion like this. I would like to ask for your guidance on how to deal with these issues. Sometimes, after a while, these phenomena disappear. That's my first question. My second question is, for example, when we look at the dedicated practitioners in Zen, such as, for example, the Japanese practitioner mentioned earlier, who, after 30 years, attained enlightenment when the bucket broke. Or like the Venerable Master Zhu Yun, who became enlightened when boiling water splashed onto the palm of his hand. Including Master Huineng, the 6th patriarch, who attained enlightenment after just 1 sentence. So, during the process of meditation, when does enlightenment occur? What are the inevitabilities and contingencies of enlightenment? I would like to ask for your guidance.
Regarding the first question, this is how I see it. Whether it is during our daily practice or in our regular activities, whether it is the auditory perceptions of sounds or the visual perceptions of phenomena, when these manifestations appear, how do we tell clearly which are real and which are false or deceptive? The great masters of the past had a very good way to distinguish them accurately after such phenomena appear. If your great compassion for all sentient beings, your altruistic bodhicitta, and your deep and unwavering faith in the 3 jewels, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, continue to steadily increase and grow stronger, and your compassion for all sentient beings grows ever stronger. At such times, it indicates that these sounds and visions are absolutely and completely genuine. So, maintaining them gradually, consistently, and diligently is also considered to be very good. If, on the other hand, they are of another kind entirely, including some temporary, deceptive illusions and false appearances, or various mundane worldly phenomena, completely lacking any spiritual essence, and your faith does not actually increase or deepen, then these may actually become very serious karmic obstacles to your spiritual practice. There is an old and highly instructive story from Chan Buddhism about Master Dao Shu that perfectly illustrates this. Next to his monastery, there was a highly powerful Taoist. The Taoists there strongly disapproved of his meditation practices and his monastery. He would often use all sorts of tricks, one day bringing storms and heavy rain. The next day, he began causing various natural disasters, using powerful Taoist magic in an attempt to harm him, but he remained completely unmoved throughout the ordeal. Many of the young monks in the monastery were so frightened that they were driven away and forced to flee. After 10 long years, the Taoist himself finally left, having no other options remaining. Later, some people asked him, "What kind of profound realization do you have that allowed you to endure all of this?" He said, "So-called Taoist arts are merely limited, finite, and temporary bounded worldly things. But the sacred enlightened thoughts and actions of Buddhism are infinite, boundless, and truly inexhaustible transcendental states. My only secret effective method was to face it with the profound principle of nothingness, or simply put, the single word, emptiness." So, just now, whether it's the visual manifestation of Amitabha or any other external phenomenon, we should not become attached to its appearance. Many eminent monks and great masters, including my own teacher, often say that many disciples have different kinds of spiritual experiences. Some people, for example, have particularly vivid experiences of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva or Amitabha Buddha. In their meditative states or dreams, they witness many especially auspicious phenomena. Others, during dreams or their practice, encounter evil spirits or heretical influences, experiencing many negative phenomena. Many people feel very happy when they witness positive phenomena. When they see negative phenomena, they become afraid. They wonder, did I practice incorrectly? Am I possessed? They become especially worried. But the main viewpoint in Buddhism is this. No matter whether the phenomena are good or bad, you shouldn't become attached to them. Just let things take their natural course. If you start to feel very joyful, thinking, maybe my practice is going really well now, at that moment it actually turns into a kind of arrogance demon. If you feel truly very disappointed, that too, in its own way, becomes a manifestation of a demon. So there is no need for us to feel either joy or suffering over these experiences. No matter what kind of phenomena appear, on the surface they are like illusions or dreams. In reality, you can use the word emptiness to describe them. When you approach it this way, your practice will naturally enter the path. This is a very important pith instruction from the lineage masters in the process of meditation. As for the Chan school you just mentioned, whether it's the Japanese female Zen master I mentioned earlier, or elder master Shu Yun, or the 6th patriarch Huineng, their level of realization, of course, the example I gave just now, the latter one specifically, doesn't really count as someone with the sharpest faculties because she practiced asceticism for 30 years, whereas Elder Master Shu Yun and the 6th Patriarch both attained enlightenment in a very short period of time. Especially the 6th Patriarch, when he first met the 5th Patriarch, he already possessed remarkable insight in the teachings. Later, after only 8 months of pounding rice in the monastery, he became enlightened. So he was the fastest. Now, is this a matter of chance or inevitability? In fact, there must be a certain inevitable cause behind it. Why? Because he was, by his very nature, someone with exceptionally sharp mental faculties and keen perception. For people like that, just a slight hint from a Chan master and relying on a single condition, they can immediately attain enlightenment. That's why in Chan Buddhism there is the sudden path and also the gradual path. The gradual path means progressing step by step, stage by stage. In this case, even within this lifetime, sometimes it might not happen, or it may sometimes take a very long time indeed before enlightenment is eventually attained. But such enlightenment should be due to karmic connections from past lives and faith in this life. This is also seen quite often in Vajrayana Buddhism. There was a master who, while standing in front of his root guru, the guru suddenly asked, "What is your name?" and at the same time grabbed his clothes. The guru's words must have had a very profound and significant meaning. He observed his own mind, and in that very moment he became enlightened. From then on, he understood all the teachings and phenomena without exception. At that time, his wisdom increased tremendously. He became one of the most renowned figures in the world, the omniscient Mipham Rinpoche. So sometimes, on the surface, it may seem like a coincidence. But in reality, many causes and conditions have been accumulating all along. Finally, when the time is right and the conditions are ripe, the fruit naturally falls from the tree. On the surface, it may seem sudden, but in reality, it is the result of long-standing causes and conditions. Moreover, he was someone of sharp faculties. Both Vajrayana and Zen have such examples. One relies on one's own faith, and the other on the special blessings of the guru. Both of these conditions must be present. However, not everyone possesses such faith on their own. Some faith are carefully cultivated through long-term dedicated training. There are indeed such cases, so this is how these causes and conditions come together.
Thank you, Guru. Due to time constraints, let's kindly give this final valuable opportunity now to Professor Mo Yongsheng, if we shall.
Thank you so much, Khenpo, for your wonderful teachings. I have attended both of your talks, from the very first one up until now. What stood out to me was that the content was never repeated, and I feel that each talk was even more convincing than the last. After listening to your second talk, a question came to my mind. Currently, there seem to be 3 types of people. The first type advocates vegetarianism, not consuming any meat, but eating only vegetables and plant-based foods. This is the vegetarian school of thought. Then there's another group who don't take vegetarianism seriously. I've always eaten meat, so why go vegetarian? Besides, they believe being vegetarian is bad for your health. That's the second type of person. The third type are those who waver and hesitate between eating vegetarian and not eating vegetarian. My question is, I feel that being vegetarian is good for health because nowadays it helps prevent high blood pressure, high blood sugar, and high cholesterol, among other benefits. I think the physical changes are something many people can see and understand. So does being vegetarian bring about any changes or improvements in a person's character or mindset? I feel that it does bring improvement in that area as well. But the question is, aside from my own understanding of the physical and mental changes brought by vegetarianism, I hope to hear from Khenpo if you could talk to us about vegetarianism, not just in terms of physical benefits, but mainly about the benefits for one's mind and character and any other advantages it may have. I'd like to hear further insights from Khenpo. Thank you.
The professor's question is actually very important as well. Being vegetarian is not only directly related to a person's physical health, but also deeply connected to their overall spiritual purity. Some people now believe that this is a unique and special practice of Buddhism or religion, but that's actually not the case. Nowadays, there are many people who are vegetarians in the world, and many of them do not have any religious beliefs at all. However, from the perspective of nutrition and health, they are concerned about their own bodies and advocate for vegetarianism for these reasons as well. Secondly, is being vegetarian related to the improvement of one's mind? It is very much related. Generally speaking, this is clearly recorded in the profound Buddhist Lankavatara Sutra to explain how compassion can effectively transform our mind. It says that if we eat the flesh of animals, animals tend to have more violent temperaments, especially specific vertebrates or various invertebrates. These have different kinds of negative physiological and mental residues. There are some animals whose nature is rather just simply too stubbornly and incredibly dull or extremely ignorant. And there are other animals that have a rather aggressive, wild or restless nature. So in the Buddhist scriptures, as I just mentioned in the Lankavatara Sutra, it says that people who generally like to eat meat will gradually and subconsciously absorb all those negative animal traits. Even if their personality was originally kind, gentle and caring by nature, because of eating meat, their temperament gradually becomes more violent. This is something we can actually observe in our daily lives. Also in Buddhism, it is said that people who just simply love to drink alcohol and eat meat will always find that their minds start to get restless and generally tend to have a really bad or quick temper. So in daily life, those who never drink alcohol and never eat meat, not all of them, but comparatively speaking, their temperament is more gentle and calm. So this mindset in Buddhism is called compassion. And if in this lifetime I eat animal meat, and I am especially fond of it, then in my next life I might possibly be reborn as a human. If I don't obtain a human body, I will become an animal. And when I become an animal, I will become one that eats the flesh of other animals, making me a carnivorous creature. This is triggered by the preferences I had in my previous life. Gradually, over time, I will develop a taste for eating the flesh of other animals. That's why I once wrote a book called The Miserable World. In that book, I specifically cited and described in detail many extremely cruel acts and methods that people nowadays use to slaughter animals. These acts include, for example, eating monkey brains, drawing blood from live animals for people to drink, and so on. These examples highlight the extent of cruelty that exists in the treatment of animals. Nowadays, in various restaurants, there are especially bad behaviors in the world, and I explain them. In the end, I made a vow. In every lifetime, I hope I will never become someone who eats animal flesh. Even if I become a beggar or someone of particularly low status, I still do not want to become someone who eats animal flesh. Because when I saw some of the karmic retributions described in Buddhism, speaking from the heart, I am also very afraid the cycle of samsara is extremely long. So as a human, even if I can't do things that benefit all sentient beings, at least I can become someone with a gentle character, someone who does no harm to society. In the next life, even if I don't obtain a human body among animals, there are actually some very peaceful creatures that only eat grass and do not harm other beings. It would be fine. To be such an animal, I don't want to be a meat-eating animal. There's a cycle of cause and effect.
Thank you very much, Khenpo. Khenpo, may I ask you another follow-up question next? After carefully listening to your inspiring teaching, may I now perhaps understand it this way? There is a saying in China, among all virtues, filial piety comes first. That is, to be a good person, one should start with filial piety. When it comes to practicing Buddhism or the Tao, should one start by becoming vegetarian? Could you please give us your teaching on this? Thank you.
Indeed, from the perspective of Confucian thought, filial piety is considered the foremost of all virtues. For those of us studying Buddhism or the Tao, it is very necessary and important to primarily follow a vegetarian diet. This is something that Chinese Han Buddhism has truly been able to achieve, and no matter what kind of setting I am in, it has now been nearly 1,600 years since then, starting from the time of Emperor Wu of Liang. Over such a long period of time, Chinese Buddhist monasteries have consistently adhered to the practice of vegetarianism. And within Chinese Han Buddhism, even many lay Buddhist groups have also maintained a vegetarian diet, continuing this tradition as part of their spiritual practice. According to the traditional practices of Tibetan Buddhism in the past, there were indeed quite a number of people who were vegetarian, but there were also those who ate meat. However, nowadays, whether in large monasteries or in other various social settings, vegetarianism is often very actively and widely promoted. This is because vegetarianism is not only directly beneficial to the lives of sentient beings, for example, among the several hundred sincere people gathered together right present here today, if we really all decided to just keep eating meat, even the entire meat from a single whole pig would simply not be enough to feed everyone in such a short period of time. Moreover, people who eat meat tend to become increasingly greedy. The Buddhist scriptures also mention that those who eat meat develop greater and greater desires. That is why we place special emphasis on promoting vegetarianism in Tibetan Buddhism as well, just considering it as another important aspect of our spiritual practice. This is not only within monasteries, but also among lay Buddhists, because for Buddhists, as clearly stated in the important and well-known Brahmajala Sutra, if one eats meat, one severs the seed of compassion, that is, the very nature of compassion. As Mahayana Buddhists, we do not wish to cut off our compassionate hearts. If we don't even have compassion, then we won't have bodhicitta. Without the precious mind of bodhicitta, attaining the state of complete Buddhahood is absolutely impossible. In this way, when we study and practice Buddhism and follow the spiritual path, the word path here should specifically refer to the Buddhist path, not to Taoism. Just as the professor mentioned, true Buddhist practice, like in Chinese Han Buddhism, involves a very simple lifestyle. In this way, I think it brings a certain kind of helpful principle to many people's lives. If you eat meat, nowadays meat is getting more and more expensive, and it is hard to afford it comfortably, so buying it all the time on a regular daily basis for your meals at home, which also actually makes it a bit difficult. Gradually, the culture of healthy vegetarianism is being actively promoted. In this way, it benefits environmental protection or the protection of life and brings many noteworthy merits for safeguarding and improving one's own personal health as well. I wrote an article called The Tibetan Esoteric View on Vegetarianism, which was 50 or 60,000 words long. In it, I quoted the views of some respected senior Tibetan masters regarding vegetarianism. I cited their perspectives because many people genuinely think that Tibetan Buddhism is all about eating meat. There's a view among Buddhists that Chinese Han Buddhism is very pure and strictly vegetarian. But in fact, not all the great Tibetan masters there actually eat meat either. It's just that in the past, due to various climatic and environmental conditions there, and the lack of abundant living resources, among other reasons. But now, many have become vegetarians. We should gradually promote this kind of healthy lifestyle among different groups. For example, yesterday, we went to a local vegetarian restaurant. Inside the place, the whole culture of vegetarianism is actually really quite well and nicely promoted. But there's one thing that I actually don't quite agree with, honestly. Nowadays, in many vegetarian restaurants, on the surface, you see foods shaped like fish, shrimp, and all sorts of things, even though they're made from vegetarian ingredients. But on the outside, they often appear to look like many different kinds of animals. This is not really necessary. Ideally, they should simply be made in purely vegetarian forms. If you really want to eat fish, frogs, or snakes, in that case, from a Buddhist perspective, if seeing these forms gives rise to negative thoughts, that's also a significant fault. So we should gradually, steadily, and consistently try to further promote the culture of vegetarianism. It should also play a very important role in world peace. Thank you, everyone.
All right, teachers and students, Professor Mao's last question just now has circled back to the previous session's topic of spiritual greening, hasn't it? I feel that in this lecture, Khenpo has once again led us into a cycle of thoughtful reflection. Today's lecture was truly wonderful and left a deep impression on me. On one hand, it has addressed many important questions and concerns that have been present in the minds of teachers and students who are engaged in the study of religion. The explanations provided were clear and insightful, helping to resolve doubts and provide reassurance to everyone listening. And on the other hand, it has also provided an introduction to important foundational knowledge for students who are just beginning their journey of learning about Buddhism, helping them take their first steps in understanding the basic concepts and ideas related to Buddhist teachings. Through this lecture, we have truly and indeed deeply appreciated the profound, timeless wisdom and the vast, unparalleled knowledge that we gain from listening to of the truly great and highly respected Khenpo. As well as his exceptionally kind-hearted nature. I think, as the great Khenpo just mentioned, from a broader perspective, these two lectures are found to be valuable for all sorts of people in the modern living world, and also very meaningful for helping to guide us in our task of building a more peaceful, harmonious society and promoting world peace through inner tranquility. And our own personal cultivation, and the gradual ongoing accumulation of virtue that comes about through consistently performing good deeds and positive actions, can help lead the entire world toward a more civilized and harmonious state, encouraging greater understanding and cooperation among people everywhere. On a more personal level, when it comes to advancing and enriching our own inner world, this is also extremely meaningful and positive, as it inspires us to grow, reflect, and become better individuals. This wonderful and inspiring lecture will be of great benefit to our future personal cultivation, as well as to our ongoing and dedicated efforts in building a harmonious world. Finally, let us give a warm and enthusiastic round of applause to sincerely thank Khenpo for his outstanding speech.